They called me a nobody with their mouths full of steak I paid for. It was my younger sister's promotion dinner, a fancy restaurant with starched white tablecloths, waiters in vests, and a strict dress code. Everyone was smiling, laughing, dressed to the nines like we were the kind of family that always did this sort of thing. Like they hadn't ghosted me for 5 straight years. Not a birthday, not a text. Nothing. I sat there in a black blazer that barely zipped up, holding my fork like a weapon because I already knew what was coming. And sure enough, right between dessert and the second round of drinks, my father lifted his whiskey glass and said, loud enough for the whole damn room to hear, to those who serve with honor. And those who just serve their egos. The laughter that followed was muted but unmistakable. Some awkward coughs. Even my sister, Haley, smirked into her champagne. My mom didn't laugh, but she didn't stop it either. She just looked down at her napkin like it held some ancient secret. I chewed my pride like it was dry bread. Not a word. No defense. Just the kind of silence that says, you're not one of us anymore. And then the restaurant doors opened. A man walked in, broad shoulders, medals across his chest, and that unmistakable command presence that makes a whole room freeze. He didn't glance at my dad. Didn't acknowledge Haley. He walked straight up to me and said, loud and clear. Brigadier General Monroe, ma'am. Welcome back. Every smug face around that table dropped like a bad stock. My father's hand trembled slightly around his glass. Haley looked like she'd swallowed her promotion whole. My mom? She suddenly remembered the folds in her napkin again. See, they buried me before I ever left the battlefield. Wrote me off. Scrubbed my name out of the family stories. Fed me to silence and gossip. But I came back. And this time, I brought the truth, and a witness. You think I'm done? Oh honey, we're just getting started. My name's Nora Monroe. I was once the pride of my family, then their shame. And now? Now I'm the reminder they can't erase. Before I tell you everything. Drop a listening in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. It means more than you think to know someone out there hears this. And hey, if this story punches you in the gut a little, maybe hit that subscribe button. Because truth like this, it deserves to be heard. Now buckle up. Let me tell you what happened when I came home that fall. It wasn't with fanfare or parades. No grand welcome for the returning officer. No home-cooked meal from a mother grateful her daughter made it back alive. Just me, Nora Monroe, walking up the cracked driveway of a house that hadn't mentioned my name in years. No one knew where I'd been. No one asked, they just assumed I'd quit. The army. The war. Maybe even life. And I let them assume. Because correcting the record would have meant digging up wounds they never had the stomach to look at in the first place. My dad decided to throw a little Veterans Day get-together that year. Just a backyard potluck, a few old friends from his unit, some neighbors who'd worn a uniform way back when. Haley showed up glowing, in a perfectly pressed National Guard uniform, medals sparkling, posture so straight it looked sculpted. She'd only been in 4 years, but from the way everyone talked, you'd think she liberated Berlin. Me? I was invited like a carbon copy on an email. Present, but unacknowledged. When I arrived, there wasn't even a name tag for me. No seat saved. My Aunt Ruth waved vaguely toward a folding chair by the water cooler. Sweetie, this spot's for Lieutenant Strickland. Mind sliding over there? She said, motioning toward a far corner. I nodded and walked to the auxiliary table, the one for forgotten salads and overflow guests. There was a big photo display Mom had put together. My dad in Vietnam. Grandpa in World War II. Haley in her dress blues at graduation. I stood there, looking at the wall, and something slowly clicked. Something, or someone, was missing. Me, the only picture I'd ever given them, my West Point commissioning photo, was gone. In its place, a generic family Christmas photo from years ago. No uniform. No trace of the officer I'd become, I turned to Mom and asked casually, "Hey, where's that old photo of me in uniform?" She didn't even glance up from the deviled eggs tray. "Oh, that one? It was getting old. I figured we'd use something more recent." But her eyes didn't meet mine. She stared past me like I was a shadow on the tablecloth. Later, a cousin asked what I'd been up to lately. Haley answered for me, laughing. "She used to be some kind of consultant or something, right? Now she's mostly home, probably collecting retirement." Someone else added, "Office jobs are safer anyway. Better than doing nothing." The laughter wasn't cruel. It was worse than that. It was casual. I slipped away to refill my water. That's when I heard it. "Monroe? Nora Monroe?" A voice, low, gravelly, like boots on concrete. I turned to see a retired colonel I didn't recognize. But his posture gave him away. "I think I read your name on the Laskin directive." "Hell of a plan," he said. I smiled too quickly. I heard that plan had too many pages. He paused, studying me. "Maybe. But it saved lives." He nodded once, respectfully. "There wasn't a lot of credit passed around for that one, was there?" "No," I said. "But credit wasn't the point." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That one look, just a flicker of recognition in a room that had forgotten I existed, was enough to ground me. For a moment, I drifted back to that night in the war room. 12 Allied units waited for my call. Intelligence said advance. My gut said hold. I held. Enemy artillery missed us by minutes. 300 soldiers made it home. The mission was later deemed strategically misguided. And I took the fall so the unit wouldn't. My name? Scrubbed from the after-action reports, but those soldiers went home. That was the cost. And that was the honor. I returned to my plastic chair by the edge of the patio. Someone filled my cup without asking. On the main table were name-etched tumblers. Haley. Dad. Uncle Mark. I drank from a plain white cup, no name. No label, but I remembered. And I whispered to myself, sometimes honor doesn't need a nameplate. But if someone dares to speak it aloud, don't stop them. The morning after the Veterans Day gathering, I got up early. The house was quiet, still asleep. The smell of leftover brisket lingered in the air, faint but stubborn, like memories that refuse to leave even when everyone wishes they would. I wandered into the living room. The old display cabinet sat there like a shrine, not to faith, but to legacy. My dad's medals. Grandpa's faded black and white portrait. Haley's National Guard plaque. All arranged proudly, carefully, like a museum for family valor. I didn't expect to see my face among them. But some part of me still looked. Old habits die hard. There was a space, not quite empty, but clearly missing something. A square of lighter wood, dust outlined like a picture frame had been removed and nothing had taken its place. My pulse ticked faster. I knelt, opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet, the one filled with junk batteries, spare keys, and old coasters. There it was, my West Point graduation frame. Still intact. Still recognizable. Except the photo inside was gone. In its place, the cardboard filler that came with it. Blank, as if I'd never been part of the picture to begin with. I sat back on my heels and just stared at it. Mom hadn't thrown it away. That would have been too direct. Too confrontational. She shelved it, like she shelved me. Not erased. Just quietly removed. Like you take down holiday decorations when the season no longer fits. Later that morning, I found her in the kitchen, pouring tea. The light from the window turned the steam into little ghosts. "When did you take my photo out of the cabinet?" I asked. She didn't flinch. Just stirred her tea, eyes fixed on the glass. I was rearranging. Thought the wall needed some air. No one really notices things like that. I nodded slowly. I know. Not noticing. That's kind of the whole point. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That night at dinner, Haley was beaming. She talked non-stop about her upcoming promotion ceremony. She'd rented a private dining room at some officers' club just outside Fort Belvoir. They have this wall of honor, she said, eyes lit up. They put your photo up for the week if you're being recognized. Mom clapped her hands. That sounds lovely, dear. Then she turned to me, Nora, if you're coming. Wear something simple. Nothing too attention-grabbing. I smiled, at least, I think I did. Sure, I said. Wouldn't want to steal the spotlight. I didn't say it out loud, but once I briefed a joint command team wearing dress blues and body armor, 12 time zones from this very table. And somehow, even my gray blouse tonight felt too much for her taste, after the dishes were done and the house had settled into a quiet lull. I was folding laundry in the guest room when my phone buzzed. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. One message: they're digging into Laskin. Some journalists found old files. Your name's in them. Be careful. That was it. No follow-up. No sender ID. Just those words, cold and clinical, like how many memories had I been in, only to be scrubbed out later? Rewritten because they didn't fit the tidy narrative of polish and pride. The frames still existed. It was just the picture that didn't make the cut. The promotion ceremony took place at a military dining hall near Virginia Beach. Polished steel. Mahogany walls. Portraits of stone-faced generals glowering from every angle. I showed up 10 minutes early in a charcoal black dress and a wool coat. It was clean, subtle. Elegant, but understated. The kind of look that could blend in, or command attention, depending on how you stood. At the check-in table, an officer scanned the guest list, then glanced at me. And you're a guest of? Before I could answer, Haley appeared like she'd been waiting for that moment all week. She's family, she said with a practiced smile. Used to do admin support or something. She's just here for me. She gave me a side hug that barely grazed my shoulder. I didn't flinch. I'd been trained not to. The dining room was dressed for a celebration. Red, white, and blue bunting. A projection screen flashing photos of Haley in uniform. A long table with seated officers and their proud families. My seat was off to the side. No name tag. No introduction. Just a folded napkin and a half-full glass of water. Then Haley took the podium. She looked radiant, bright-eyed, confident. The golden child in olive green. I want to share a quick story, she said. When I was a kid, my sister once told me, go ahead and try. I don't think I can keep up with you. And that stuck with me. That was the moment I swore I'd never quit, no matter how hard it got. The room chuckled politely. A few people turned toward me, those faint, pitying glances reserved for faded stars and forgotten names. I held my fork. Said nothing. I wasn't going to be the punchline in her origin story. I wasn't going to argue with a ghost in a room full of applause. The ceremony continued. Citations were read. Medals pinned. Laughter, handshakes, champagne flutes clinking, and then, the doors opened. A man in dress blues stepped inside. You could tell the uniform was custom, tailored for power. Shoulders that carried the weight of operations you'd never read about. He scanned the room like it was a briefing. Like he still held command, Haley stepped forward to greet him. Colonel Dempsey, sir, what an honor. He didn't let her finish. His eyes slid past her like she wasn't even standing there. They landed on me. He crossed the room in 7 measured steps, stood at attention, and saluted. General Monroe, ma'am, he said. It's been far too long. Every fork froze. Every glass stopped midair. Heads turned like dominoes. My father's jaw locked in place. Someone whispered, General? Is she really? Haley's mouth opened, but no sound came. I nodded once, slowly. Colonel. Good to see you again. He turned to the group of younger officers gathered nearby. This woman coordinated the withdrawal routes during Operation Halberd, he said, gesturing toward me. Half of NATO owes her their necks. Literally. I didn't smile. I didn't have to. His words lit the air like a flare in a blackout, and for once, I didn't have to prove I'd been there. The silence did it for me. Later, as the crowd slowly began to stir again, a young cadet walked up to me. Nervous hands. Clean shave. Probably couldn't have been more than 22. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "Are you really a general?" I took a slow sip from my glass, still the same cheap plastic kind, of course, and looked him in the eye. Once, I gave the order not to fire, I told him, even when protocol said I could. There were children inside the target zone. I chose consequences over casualties. I leaned in just enough for the words to settle deep. "You tell me, what title does that earn?" He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I left the promotion dinner without saying goodbye. No hugs. No parting smiles. Just the steady click of my boots against the pavement. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like wind blowing open a door that had long since rusted shut. Cold. Jarring. Unfinished. The next morning, while the house still whispered in slow, early movement, I opened my inbox. A message sat at the top, subject line in bold, Laskin strategic brief, urgent inquiry. It was from a journalist. John Ryder. A name I hadn't heard in years, but I knew the reputation. He was the kind of guy who cracked open secrets wrapped in red tape. General Monroe, it read. "We've received a classified operations file from the Laskin campaign. Your name appears alongside an internal summary alleging you authorized a maneuver that led to civilian deaths. We're seeking confirmation or correction. Please advise." I read it once, then again. The third time, my hands didn't shake. They locked, because I knew that file. I'd seen it. Studied it. Breathed it. The Laskin campaign wasn't a tactical failure, it was a trap. A loop of false intelligence. A baited game rigged by someone who had access to both sides of the board. Vaughn, General Marcus Vaughn. Intel chief at the time. The man I'd challenged in a closed-door briefing, where I was the only dissenting voice. One red flag in a sea of green lights. When the operation fell apart, I took the hit to protect the team. I ate the blame. Got scrubbed from the command. I walked into the guard counsel's office wearing my old coat. No fanfare. Just medals tucked inside my pocket like ghosts I didn't need to show. When they asked what I knew, I answered clearly. I asked Captain Monroe to re-access the file. I was investigating an anomaly from the Laskin logs. Any breach in protocol is mine alone. Silence. One board member raised a brow. "You're saying she followed your directive?" "Yes," I replied. "I bear the responsibility." A lie, but not a betrayal, a shield. WN years ago. I called Sarah, no answer. Texted, nothing. Security logs showed she left the base at 11:04 p.m. She never came back, just disappeared, like fog at sunrise. And that's when I realized, this wasn't over, this wasn't about me anymore. This was about what people do to bury the truth, and what I was willing to do to unearth it. The next day, an encrypted message popped onto my screen. No sender. No subject line. Just a few words. "I'm alive. They're holding me at the old comms post, south of Fort Hamilton. I have the data. Strix Runner is the key." No signature. But I knew it was Sarah. I dropped a secure ping to Colonel Dempsey, my oldest ally from Special Analysis Command. If anyone could reach that abandoned comm station without setting off alarm bells, it was him. Then there was Ethan O'Neill, cadet, 23. Far too sharp for his rank. He had a bad habit of showing up at the worst moments. And hearing exactly the right things. He found Haley and me in the parking garage behind the academy, huddled over audit logs and tracking metadata. We didn't even notice him until he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, as calm as if he were discussing the weather, "do you think sometimes honesty needs as much planning as a strike?" I paused. "Every time," I said. "But only when you believe the victory isn't worth your soul." He nodded like he already knew that. The kid was going to be a good officer. If the system didn't eat him alive first. Just before midnight, another alert hit my inbox. Internal Security flagged a military intelligence summit at Arlington. Scheduled in 3 days. Confirmed attendees, international brass, NATO liaisons, high-ranking Pentagon officials, and General Marcus Vaughn. He wasn't just attending, he was coming to lock down the narrative. Photo ops. Diplomatic smiles. Glowing speeches about unity. Meanwhile, under the surface, he'd make sure whatever scraps of truth were still out there got erased like chalk in the rain. I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. This was it. The war I'd tried to leave behind. It had just RSVP'd. From the top floor of the academy, I looked out over the training field. Cadets marched like chess pieces. Precise, predictable, unaware they were being watched. Each step echoed a reminder, I used to be them. And maybe, if I did this right, I could protect what they hadn't seen yet. Barrett, ever the tactician, sent me a file with his usual dry humor stamped on the envelope. In case of fire, light match. Inside was a plan. Not foolproof, but tight. There was a side entrance to the Arlington summit, rear access, used by vendors and low-level staff. Lightly manned. Easy to blend in, a defunct AV uplink nearby, still wired into the building's internal sound system. No one had bothered to pull it out. Too old. Too forgotten, which made it perfect. Haley was the one who said it first, "Let me be the inside." She stood by the whiteboard where we'd mapped out the flow of the summit. Her arms crossed, her face steady. "They already know I've been under review," she added. "It won't be strange if I show up asking for reinstatement." She paused. "I'll wear Dad's badge. Mike Monroe. I want to do this right." I hesitated. The last time she tried to fix something, we nearly lost everything. But this time, her voice didn't shake. She wasn't trying to erase me anymore. She was trying to bring me back. At 1,600 hours on the day of the summit, Haley entered through the south gate in a plain uniform, badge clipped neatly, device hidden behind it. I monitored from a van 3 blocks away. Laptop humming. Cables running across the floor like veins under skin. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Finally approaching Vaughn. He stood mid-circle, surrounded by generals and bureaucrats with expensive watches and tighter smiles. When he saw her, he didn't blink. "General Monroe," he said into the air, his voice slow and calculated. "You always had a knack for surviving storms you shouldn't have weathered." Then, looking directly at Haley, "Do you know why people like your sister are dangerous? Because they think justice matters more than logistics." He chuckled, dark and smooth. "I fed that mission false intel." "Yes. You know why? Because a clean win makes cleaner headlines. And soldiers? They follow the version we print." I hit the uplink trigger. His voice began playing through the internal speaker system. Crystal clear. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. The room froze. Then, static. The signal cut. Someone had found our uplink and severed it. I threw the van door open and sprinted toward the backup relay. Cables snapped from their ports as I rerouted power. Ethan was already there, prying open the metal case with a multi-tool. Then, movement, a shadow from the parking lot. One shot, crack. Ethan stumbled backward, hit in the shoulder. I caught him before he hit the ground. Blood seeping through his sleeve. He gritted his teeth and whispered, "Don't let them win with silence." I tightened the makeshift bandage, set him against the wall. My hands moved on instinct. My mind was on fire. This wasn't about reputation anymore. This was about survival and truth. I raced back to the van, flipped every remaining switch, reconnected the backup feed. The system blinked, then caught. This time, I didn't wait. I spoke directly into the mic. "My name is Brigadier General Nora Monroe. Once, I was told I was a nobody. Today, I carry a truth: when power manipulates records, soldiers die. When intel is altered to fit a narrative, families are broken. When silence is treated as strategy, it becomes complicity. Vaughn's voice echoed again, unedited, uncut, every lie turned into a confession in front of the very people he thought he controlled. Inside, the entire room turned toward him. No one smiled, they didn't shout. They didn't tackle us, they just walked us out. Haley and I were led through a quiet hallway in the back of the Summit building. No names. No charges. Just a windowless room with too much fluorescent lighting and too little warmth. And then, he walked in, Vaughn, his face still calm, but his hands, they betrayed him. Fists clenched. Knuckles white, he didn't pretend to be a mentor now, he was the predator in his own den. I'm offering you peace, he said, a dignified retirement. Your cadets left alone. Your family untouched. And you, preserved, in the margins of history. I didn't blink. You still don't get it, I said. I never fought for legacy. I fought for something you can't fabricate, dignity. He laughed once. Sharp. Bitter, and then the door blew open. Dempsey entered first, followed by Ethan, arm in a sling, eyes steady, and behind them, Sarah, pale, but unbroken. She stepped forward, pulled a small drive from her coat, and placed it on the table. Full logs, she said. African Relief Fund diversions. Falsified orders. Audio backups. Everything. Vaughn lunged, his hand shot toward the drive, but Haley moved first. She stepped between them, uniform crisp. Eyes unwavering. I was afraid of you once, she said. Not anymore. I took an oath of honor, not blind loyalty. Security flooded in, but they didn't come for us. They came for him, and Vaughn, he finally understood what it meant to lose a war he never prepared for. After they escorted Vaughn out of the building, a nurse intercepted me. Ethan had collapsed, internal bleeding. They stabilized him in time, but he'd need weeks of recovery. I stood at the ICU window for a long time, watching him breathe behind layers of tubing and plastic. Machines beeped rhythmically beside him, like a reminder that courage doesn't always come in perfect condition. He's not trained for this, the nurse whispered. No, I said softly. But he understands it better than most. He reminded me what bravery really looks like. And it doesn't wear medals. Days later, the Pentagon reached out. They offered me reinstatement, a command seat. Strategy and prestige. The kind of role that came with a car, a title, a security detail. I turned it down, not because I didn't deserve it, but because I'd already climbed that ladder once, and I knew what it looked like from the top: quiet, lonely, dangerously silent. Instead, I returned to the academy, not because I lacked strength, but because I finally had enough of it to lead from the ground up. The headline spread faster than I expected. Across military blogs. Mainstream media. General Marcus Vaughn arrested for intelligence manipulation and embezzlement. Laskin operation cover-up exposed. And for the first time in years, my name wasn't next to his as the fall guy. It stood alone. General Nora Monroe identified as key whistleblower in DoD cover-up. It didn't feel like redemption. It felt like gravity finally letting go of my shoulders just enough to breathe. Then came the hearing. An internal panel summoned me to clarify my involvement. I stood in front of them, not in full dress, no ribbons, no script. Just me and the truth. Some of the faces on the panel were familiar. Men who'd once ignored my warnings. A few even pretended not to remember me, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't set out to become a symbol, I told them. But silence is not neutrality. And I will never apologize for disturbing a peace built on deception. The verdict: full restoration of my rank and honors, no charges. No spin, Haley. Formally reprimanded. But cleared to remain in active service. We walked out of the room together, not as the perfect daughters our parents once tried to shape, but as whole women who'd seen the system from the inside. And chose not to be swallowed by it. A week later, I returned to the house I grew up in. I hadn't stepped through that doorway in almost a decade. The hallway still creaked in the same places. The rug by the back door still curled at the edge. But something had shifted. On the shelf near the stairs, a photo had returned, my commissioning portrait, framed. Polished, placed beside Haley's graduation picture, a quiet restoration. A truce, my mother stood nearby, no tears. No grand apology, just a voice breaking under the weight of honesty. I never knew love could be that silent, she whispered. And that cruel. I nodded, I'm not here to blame. I'm here to lay it down. Then my father, who'd barely said a full sentence to me in years, stepped forward. In his hand was a wooden box. Inside it, a letter, dated 3 weeks after I'd left the service. His handwriting, I didn't know how to say I was still proud. I didn't know if you'd want to hear it. I didn't read it then, I just tucked it into my jacket, close to my chest, where it had always belonged. Back at the academy, a new photo appeared on the bulletin board outside the cadet mess hall. It was a group shot, me, Ethan, Haley, a few bright-eyed young officers. Arms slung over each other's shoulders. Smiling, no hierarchy, no rank. Underneath it, someone had written in thick marker, she didn't fight for attention. She fought for attention to the truth. And that's when I realized, legacy isn't made of medals, it's carried in the lessons people choose to remember. The next morning, I walked into my lecture hall. No spotlight. No nameplate, just a whiteboard and 30 faces waiting not for instruction, but for connection. This isn't a class about war, I began, it's a class about what happens after. When the battlefield goes quiet and silence becomes more dangerous than bullets. When truth gets auctioned off to the highest bidder. I looked around the room. Today, we're learning how to win, and still walk away with your soul. Time moves differently when you're not trying to outrun it. Every morning, I made coffee in the staff kitchen. Watched the sunlight crawl across the whiteboard. Heard the familiar rhythm of cadets' boots in the hallway. No ovation, no applause, just continuity, and peace, however fragile. One morning, as I wrote the words moral intelligence on the board, Ethan walked in, his arm was still in a sling. His steps were slower. But his eyes? Steady as ever. He took his seat in the front row. After class, I found a folded note on his desk. It read, I used to think courage was a loud scream. Now I know, it's the quiet truth spoken when no one's listening. I held that note longer than I needed to, because that truth, that was everything I had once forgotten. Haley didn't return to her post at the Guard. She turned down the offer of reinstatement. Instead, she joined a small civilian watchdog organization, independent, underfunded, but vital. Their mission: investigate internal abuses that threaten those who serve. Why? I asked one afternoon. She smiled, because if anyone knows what it feels like to be betrayed by the very thing you served, it's me. And I couldn't argue with that. A month later, we returned to the old base where I'd once commanded. The building had been repainted. My name long removed from the roster, but behind the parade yard, beneath a fading chestnut tree, Haley and I placed a plaque. No rank, no name, just these words, for those who died unnamed, but never unnoticed. We didn't say much. Grief, when shared honestly, doesn't need language. It lives in the space between breaths. The night before my final lecture of the term, another message hit my secure line. No name, no number, just a few words. Nora, the cracks in defense haven't stopped. But now they know you're not standing alone. I didn't save the number, but I saved the feeling. That feeling of once being erased from history, and now being the reason someone had to rewrite it. The next morning, I entered my classroom. The door clicked shut behind me. Soft and certain, I looked at the faces in front of me. No ranks, no armor, just future leaders, ready to think beyond doctrine. I won't teach you how to win today, I said. I'll teach you how to stand for something so solid that even when you lose, you're still whole. I paused, then added, "You won't always be believed. But live so that when the truth rises, it calls you first." Because sometimes, the loudest victories come in silence, the kind that doesn't make headlines, but heals the soul, and truth, it doesn't always roar, sometimes it simply refuses to stay buried.